I want to talk a little bit anyway, about youth ministry in Ireland, because maybe the Germans will be interested you're here, but for all of us I think there's some interest in it. Not that I'm an expert on it, but at least a few pointers. Recognise that you already have a lot of material in these days. Jared Gallagher, who you have already met, he puts it this way in the book he's written. The story of youth ministry in Ireland is a tapestry of many threads, creating as of yet an unknown design. The diversity of approaches in youth ministry has been significant. In other words, many things, many approaches, many different ways. At this age, a 50-year history, which I think, for all the difficulties that are there, we also have to be grateful for. A lot has gone on in 50 years. There have been many, many initiatives right back, and let's be grateful for them too. We see problems today, yes, but let's be grateful. There has also been good things, a rich tapestry indeed. Many, many people who've kept going when it wasn't always easy and kept persevering. Admittedly, sometimes people may be burnt out and worn down by it too, and we have to acknowledge that. Gratitude for their commitment and seeking forgiveness for perhaps the times we've overstretched them and not completely understood youth ministers. But it has been a significant time in Ireland in terms of youth ministry. Now, I was going to try and retrace all the 50 years. I said, there's no way I cannot possibly do that, so if you're lucky, I'm not going to do that. That's today. But to say that, of course, we had in Ireland the big event of 1979 when the Pope came, the World Youth Meeting, and after that then, I should say the Youth Meeting in Galway, and after that many initiatives, many centres were built. Breeder Foynes, St. Kevin's Youth Adult Community, Tabor House in Dublin. Michael Liston, who's a priest from Limerick, talked about a young church, and that's important. We aren't just doing things for young people, there is a young church, and that's what we're actually involved in, an emerging church. Many young people studying theology. So there was a lot goes on after the 1979 visit, but at the same time, I was struck by a comment by Michael Warren, who is a writer in 1985, written a book, again in 1998, written a book. But it's interesting, already in 1985 he said the following, and I thought, it's so true. The book, in 1985, we had the bishop's letter, The Young Church, and it's a good letter, The Young Church, in which they talked about listening. We need to listen more, we need to have a new way of coming at the whole thing. It was quite a strong, fresh letter. It was written together with the youth directors of the time. So it was a collaborative approach on the part of the bishops, a new openness, a new approach, and had great promise. Nevertheless, writing around the same time, Michael Warren comments, most of the young people I met, he met different groups in Ireland, most of the young people I met seem to have a schizoid relationship with the church. What they name as church are structures or religious power that have dealt with them since childhood. In the account so many people gave of these structures of power, they see themselves having been objects, not subjects. In this sense, they see the church as something that was done to them. That struck me, that phrase. The church is something done to you. You go in, you go to the schools, you go to the sacraments. It's all a machine that does something to you. Instead of the participative, you being a subject, you being an agent. Michael Warren continued, in listening to young people talk about matters of faith, I was unprepared for the lack of understanding they had about actual church positions. When it came to discussing basic questions, young people I spoke to were both inarticulate and incoherent. I expected to find much more understanding in persons who had had 5 classes a week of religious content over a period of at least 10 years. Whatever processes had been used to help them understand the basics of Christian understanding, not much of that teaching stuck with them. This is true, this issue of the message sticking is not just a problem in Ireland. I was at a meeting a few years ago in the Vatican for European people involved in teaching religion. Everywhere, more or less, bar 1 or 2 countries, had the same point. We actually are teaching, we actually are giving the material, but it's not sticking. It's an issue. But that has been an issue a long time. For instance, I can recall when I was about, I'd say 17 or 18, I don't know where, I must have read it or something. And it was me that said it, my friend, I can't remember now. But my friend of mine, we had both all been to school, we'd done all the catechism we'd done. It was a friend said to me, he said, did you know that at the Mass, it's meant to be a reenactment of Calvary? Did you ever hear that? Oh, I never heard that. Oh, I never heard that. Both of us had been taught completely as Catholics. But a basic point of Catholic understanding of Mass, somehow it had gone over our heads. Of course, partly because you're young, you have to grow in understanding. But it's interesting, that is the case. Michael Warren pointed that out for us. The church was something done to people. It doesn't always stick. And that's, I think, something we have to recognise. So the bishops wanted to listen in 1985. They said they wanted to listen very clearly, and yet they listened in a way they didn't expect, because out of the, as we know, unfortunately came, yes, of course, many initiatives with youth directors in Ireland, but out of that all, however, came something we didn't expect, which was the whole enormous impact of clerical abuse revelations in Ireland, which had an enormous impact in Ireland. Enormous impact. The bishops were to listen, but to listen completely to other kinds of stories, the stories of victims of abuse, young people, unfortunately, tragically, and many, many stories, which were still being listened to, are being listened to. Nothing we can say that chapter is past. That is an ongoing chapter. It's a continuing chapter. And I recall when the Murphy report came out in Dublin in 2009, I think Archbishop Dermot Martin, he said this, and it struck me at the time because I felt rightly in 2009 he's hitting something here. This is going to impact particularly on young adults. I appeal especially to young people among you not to abandon the church. Your church lies in the future, the long future, which will be there where my generation will have long since gone. The church will not be reformed by abandoning the church, but by living the word. The church needs your integrity and honesty and idealism. I think probably a lot of research needs to be done a bit in Ireland and on the impact of clerical child abuse on young people and their relationship to the church. Of course, there's bigger issues in Ireland. We had secularisation coming, real economic progress coming, boom. We had the whole development of Ireland and European Union, many great things about Ireland progressing. And of course that would have brought with it its own challenges, of course, in terms of understanding faith in a new way as an adult in that kind of more progressive, modern, well-being kind of society. Clearly the impact of the child abuse scandals cannot be underestimated. Youth ministry certainly kept going, and we again salute those who did. For instance, the Shliela Jesuit program, many youth ministries here, our own diocese in Limerick, give them great credit, kept going. We have a youthful, good youth ministry program. Many people, every year, we have loads of people signing up for the Lourdes pilgrimage. We have a waiting list every year. Not everybody goes. We have about 100 young people go every year, and there's a waiting list for it. We have a summer program in West Kerry, in Brood na Groiga, where people come and stay and live a, what we call a winter's experience, a community experience for 2 weeks together. We have the Inish program, which is a kind of skills and transformation program for the transition year students. So thank God that has kept going, and we have great people involved in that. We now have recently just trained a significant, maybe 30 youth leaders, which will be working with dioceses. I know other dioceses have been doing that, and other similar things in Kerry, down in Connor, many places. So there's a lot of good work going on as well. In 2009, we have the document which is called Together, Making the Difference. Now, here I'm loath to say too much because we have a great expert here in our midst. Father Michael was very significantly involved in this document, in putting together this document, which is a very valuable document because, number one, it gives us a read of some of the situation in Ireland. For instance, saying things like, we're obviously living in a time where there's a trend towards a religion-less spirituality, and also a trend towards a privatized religion, or a growing religious individualism. I have religion, but my take on it and my shape of it. But the document tries to pull a lot of threads together of reflection of, well, where is youth ministry? What has happened? Where is it going? What's it about? And it looks at the whole thing of accompanying young people, encouraging young people to be more aware of their spiritual, trusting their faith, helping them make good decisions, helping them understand what it means to have faith, and showing them how to be involved in the church. And it gives us kind of the elements that should be involved in youth ministry, without any particular order. That youth ministry should involve a ministry of advocacy, a ministry of justice and service, a ministry of community life, a ministry of evangelization, a ministry of catechesis, the faith, a ministry of leadership development, a ministry of pastoral care, a ministry of prayer and worship. These are elements that the document Called Together Faith highlights. I was struck by the sentence which said, "In a world that often leaves young people feeling isolated and alienated, the church wants to be a place of friendship, belonging and wisdom for them." I think that's important. Around the same time, maybe a year or two later, we had the National Directory for Catechetics in Ireland, and our National Catechetics Directory. It too talked about young people, saying, taking the American document, youth ministry involves connecting young adults with Jesus Christ, connecting young adults with the church, connecting young adults with the mission of the church in the world, and connecting young adults with peer community. In Limerick we had our Synod, and in our Synod we obviously talked to young people, and clearly the whole question of belonging and the needing for leadership models of formation came out very strongly. In other words, a lot of people in the Synod felt we needed to do more for young people across the church, because one of the big elements lacking is the parish dimension of youth ministry. What we can help in parishes, how we can help people in parishes in youth ministry. In 2015, I was involved myself in Maynooth, we brought together 70 people working across various organisations and sectors for a meeting entitled "Working Together to Share Gospel Joy with the Young Church." Anyway, to say it very briefly, out of that came the idea that we need much more networking, much more joining of dots, and the idea has grown up that perhaps we in Ireland could have something like the Catholic Youth Ministry Federation that's in England and Wales. That we could have a federation here that would pull together a lot of the people and initiatives in youth ministry, because there is a risk that we're working disjointedly, whereas in fact if we work together, network together, we could have a greater impact. That has been going on, and have I got there? Yeah. So maybe just move on then towards the Synod 2018, which is, as you know, coming up in October. There's a Synod specifically on young people, the faith and vocational discernment. There was this debate whether the Synod should just be on young people, should it be on vocations, and Pope Francis seemingly just linked them. And he said, it's young people, faith, their journey, and discernment. And that brings in the vocational side of it. But I thought that was a very, obviously, wise thing to do, because it brought out elements of what we're at in youth ministry, which again for Pope Francis, being a Jesuit, he really underlines helping people discern, help people make decisions. He said we have choices all the time. We're all the time making choices. How do we make choices? How do we make good choices? That is for him key in youth ministry. Well, in the document, again, the Pope invites us to go out. This is the famous thing he keeps saying. To go out, make a new world, but also go on a journey of discernment to discover God's plan in your life. Even when the journey is uncertain, you fall, God, rich in mercy, will extend his hand to pick you up. This is very strong for Pope Francis. When he was in Krakow, the youth, he had this moment with the young people present. Do you believe we can change things? Can we change things? And, he got them to shout, yes, I can't hear you. Yes, we can change things. And for him there's this conviction that we have to also bring young people to realise the world can be changed. We don't have to be overwhelmed. I think Pope Francis has this strong sense that young people have been sidelined in the world's greater powers. They've been, he would say it's been almost kind of systematically done that the powers that be would have controlled so many things without we don't realise how controlled we are. They've managed as well to take young people away into all kinds of things, which is kind of keeping them away from changing the world. And he wants to, I think, to bring people to recognise, no, young people are people who can change the world. But they have to make good choices to do that. Young people have a need for persons of reference. He really believes that. And studies show that. If young people have people who care, it makes a huge difference in the world. People of reference point, people who can care for them. Yes, I came across in that document, there's a document which is the document prepared for the Synod, and it talks about the Eastern Church has a way of pushing it. I thought this was a nice way of putting it. What they call 3 births. We're born into this world naturally. We're born through baptism, reborn through baptism into the faith in Jesus Christ. But then there's a 3rd birth. And you could say it's the birth at the end of our lives when, please God, we'll be born into the next life, the spiritual life, the next world. But in a certain sense, that's also the birth that's going on throughout our life. And those of us involved in youth ministry are involved in helping young people be born into this spiritual life that's awaiting them, where their life choices will blossom. But back to discernment, Pope Francis talks about the 3 words that he uses. We need to know, it's a bit the see, judge and act that you're talking about. We need to know how to recognise what's going on in the world, name it, see it, interpret it, judge it, work out what's right, what's wrong, what directions are we being pointed to, where is God working in all of this, and then decision, action. Those 3 things. A lovely sentence in that document. Jesus' encounter with the people of his time, as recorded in the Gospels, highlights certain elements which are part of the ideal profile of the person accompanying a young person in vocational discernment, namely, a loving look, according to the first disciples, an authoritative word, teaching the synagogues at Capernaum, an ability to become a neighbour, part of the Good Samaritan, a choice to walk alongside others, disciples on the road to Emmaus, an authentic witness, fearlessly going against preconceived ideas, washing of the feet. I thought that's a lovely profile. Is this a profile of somebody involved in youth ministry? Where you look, authoritative word, become a neighbour, journey alongside a person, witness fearlessly.
Bishop Brendan, where is that from? Is that from the preparation document?
Yeah, that's from that document, that preparatory document. It's in the preparatory document. Yeah. And then he says, young people need to be participating in structures of the church. And finally, he says we need planning. We need to be careful to make sure we're planning. Now, in Ireland, we had a consultation in preparation for the Synod. Every diocese, the big ask, but you've had a lot about that, have you? Did Jared go into that?
Didn't mention much.
I mean, the big ask was a campaign. Now, beyond the big ask, we also had other levels of consultation. We met with priests, with people in parishes. I met with some focus group, for instance, from the Limerick Youth Service. So we've had different levels. The results are, interesting. I mean, from the point of view, many things I suppose we wouldn't be overly surprised, even though it might always be hard to hear, that young people feel the church is distant. It's not part of their lives. And we might say, well, the schools, the families, yes, but the schools and families aren't for them church. So they don't see churches near. That the church is distant. They don't, poor quality liturgies, poor homilies. The teachings of the church for them are problematic. We've seen it ourselves with the same-sex referendum last year. The whole issue of LGBT, the whole issue of church teachings, morality and sexuality, women ordination, all those issues for young people, they find it very hard to understand the church. Part of that is linked to what some people would say, of course, we're moving in an era where the whole issue, we have it now with the fake news, post-truth, all that. That is part of the situation we're in. We're in a time when we're in a post-truth phase. So that how you access truth, how you ask questions about truth, how do we know things, they're not major questions. And so the church having a teaching is not really something that young people can buy into easily. There is a recognition, of course, there are many groups that are involved with young people. As I said, we have the Untitled group ourselves here, we've Youth 2000, we've the Friars of Renewal, we've different communities that I mentioned before, Charismatic, Preparatory, Community of Nazareth, Divine Mercy Group, many Youth 2000 groups. We've got the influence of grandparents, we've got the initiatives of various youth ministries, religious orders doing youth ministries. So there's a lot of trends, a lot of, I should say, initiatives were highlighted by young people as positive. For instance, especially third level colleges and chaplaincies, they were considered important. Nevertheless, a consistent theme is the whole issue of don't make us feel guilty with your teachings. We need to find a way that our teachings are promoting freedom, are seen as promoting freedom, are seen as promoting growth, are seen as promoting development, the full flowering of the person. But young people themselves talked about pressures, and this was interesting, a lot on pressures. They feel that peer pressure, education pressure, job pressure, success pressure, mental health issues, sexual identity issues, drugs, alcohol, the pressure to succeed, and then the pressure of fear from their peers. If they go to Mass, there's a fear. They'll be jeered, they'll be seen less. So there's a pressure not to practice their faith, for some young people would say. But as I say, all the concepts of love, human rights, freedom, they would challenge many of their young people's views of established church teaching. And naturally, as well, the whole consumerist culture, family breakdown, these are significant challenges for them. Pope Francis comes across again and again as very popular in Ireland for among young people. Yes, again, talking about positively, some of the young people talk about World Youth Days, the Camino, pilgrimages, faith experiences that they've been involved in. But really a big plea, I think, to be relevant. That's the big message that comes across, I think, from the Consultation. We want a relevant church to us as young people, where we're at. That is true too for us in the Synod last year in Limerick when our Consultation was done. Clearly, yes, one of the big issues was the church's teachings and all kinds of issues, but also a big plea for the church to do something around mental health. Or, as I read one author say to me recently, we should really talk about mental ill health. In other words, the issues around mental health are very significant for young people. They're dealing with a lot of their own personal problems or that of their friends who have issues. That might be addiction issues or depression issues or suicide issues or whatever. So young people are very focused on the mental health question. Final considerations, okay, this is just by way of concluding then, and we'll open up into the dialogue. These are a few things. Now I've about, just in case you got your hopes up too much, I've about 10 final considerations, okay, that I wanted to put before you as something that you might consider. A few pointers. For those of us who are involved in youth ministry, that's all of us in one way or other. A few points that I've jotted down, partly based on some of the things we talked about, both partly based on some of the things we saw from the consultation of young people, partly based on where we're going, and hearing your own judgments. A first point, living life, giving life. I think in youth ministry we all know that it's great to have programs and they can be more or less successful. But there's nothing to beat life, giving life. We all know that what has most impacted us has been when people shared their story, their life experience, or we could see in them that they were trying to live what they were saying. And that can be that we have key significant people in our own lives. I can certainly think of my own when I was young. was a religious sister. She would arrange the youth groups, and she was living in a convent. She was a religious sister, so we could see this was the life of somebody she was living. Likewise, I even remember, even as a young seminarian, meeting a married couple who shared what they were living of the gospel in their lives. And I have to say, it was the life that impacted on me. So, rather than reduce, I suppose, our youth ministry to programs, we've all the time to be double checking, am I giving life? The pelican principle. The pelican takes the blood from itself to feed its young. Life gives life. And remember again, where does youth ministry start? It starts with the church start. Where does the church start? It starts in God making a decision to send His Son out of love that we might have life. The life that is God. And in a way, that's where we are. And we've all the time to be rectifying, double checking in our minds that, as Jesus says, these things I've spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. The second thing is, obviously, we need very much to be listening to the Spirit entering into each other's world, especially young people's world. And this is no easy task. But remember, St. Paul says it, I've made myself all things to all people so that I may gain some. In other words, really trying to listen to the Holy Spirit today as we're encountering young people. A German bishop I knew, Klaus Hemmelid, he died about 20 years ago, but I loved a little prayer he said which really struck me. It was more than a prayer, it was a kind of something he addressed to young people. Help me understand from you your way of thinking, your language, and your questions, the way you are, so that I may learn in a new way the message which I have as a task to hand over to you. So as Pope Paul VI says, we do have a message, we do have a content, but we nearly have to learn from your questions, your way of doing things, for how it is I to do it. As I think I say myself, it's in contact with young people that has become increasingly something in terms of categories. What are the things young people are interested in? For instance, I was asked by a group 2 or 3 years ago to give a talk on the topic of resilience. But I've never thought of resilience as a topic, but it came from young people. They wanted the topic on resilience. Or another group asked me to be with them on the topic of regeneration, regenerate. A third thing, we know Rublov's icon of the Trinity. But I think it's also, following on a bit for the last point we've made, in a way we have to relate to one another in what we might call a Trinitarian relationship. 3 persons who are equal, one, but in one another. And this is what Pope Francis says about the pyramid being turned upside down. There's no superior, inferior. We're in relation to one another, listening and learning, giving and receiving. And in a way, in our youth ministry, that's something I think we all the time have to be promoting across the whole church. A little example, a humorous example that I like, a mother told me once a few years ago, and I liked it as an example, that her son, she was giving out one day to her son, she was complaining her son did something, and she was reprimanding him. So she gave a little, well, not little, she spoke a bit. Anyway, later on, her son came back to her and said, Mom, you are like a Duracell battery. You go on and on and on. And she said, initially it was a bit difficult, but then she understood. She said, I understood in that moment, he was teaching me. He was teaching me. And that is the way of relationships. We teach and we learn, we give and we receive. There's going out, there's a coming back. Certainly in youth ministry, I think we are accompanying young people in the conquest of freedom. I've always liked that. It sounds like a paradox. You're conquering freedom, but freedom has to be conquered. Because freedom is conditioned, especially in the modern world, conditioned by 1,000 things. Just look at in the internet, how many conditions immediately, we're all conditioned. To be free inwardly, to make your own decisions, to be master of yourself, to have dominion over your own choices. that requires training. And in a way, we have to be trained in that. There's a nice episode in the Gospel of the blind man Bartimaeus meeting Jesus. And notice, Jesus says to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The man's blind. It's obvious, give me sight. But Jesus doesn't do the obvious. He wants the man to be able to say and name and take his own control over what it is he wants or doesn't want. Jesus doesn't want to impose on him what he should want or what doesn't want. And that's true for us. Freedom is something that we have to gain ourselves. And I have to say, my own youth, that was very important. I remember somebody giving, when I was about 22, 23, giving a talk on that topic, the conquest of freedom, and it had a huge impact on me. Because I was realising the whole area, of our affectivity, our affection, sexuality, that we're all the time conditioned. But we need to have freedom inside us. But it's something we have to conquer, we have to gain. We help one another gain it. But so youth ministry, I think, is very important in helping people gain freedom. It's not teaching morality for the sake of morality. It's not just a code of commandments for the sake of commandments. All of that makes sense because it's directed towards freedom. And we have to help people become free. And this is, of course, Pope Francis is forever at this. That's why we have discernment. To help young people realise themselves, to become themselves who they are, deep down themselves. We also are involved in the business of promoting revolutionaries. And I think this is important for us again in youth ministry, because sometimes perhaps in youth ministry we're involved in the business of accompanying, consoling, caring, helping. Yes, all of that is vital. But I think Pope Francis is also somebody who says, yeah, but that's not enough. To be human is to be for others. To be human is to be a revolutionary. And that we need to rekindle revolution. The world is broken. It needs to be mended. It needs people to mend the world. And so, in a way, youth ministry is about promoting revolutionaries, justice, fraternity, peace. Gandhi, I read a line from Gandhi which I liked. He said, you Christians have been entrusted with a text which has in itself enough dynamite to explode the world, to explode in the world a whole new civilization. To turn the world upside down in order to promote and bring peace in a planet devastated by war. Pope Francis asks, how can we reawaken the greatness and the courage of comprehensive choices, of the impulses of the heart in order to face academic and emotional challenges? The phrase I use very often is, take a risk, take a risk. Whoever does not risk does not walk. And what if I fail or make a mistake? Blessed be the Lord. You will make more mistakes if you remain still. So be revolutionists. I think it's important for our own youth ministry. We're not just accompanying, we're not just liturgy, we're not just spiritual guidance, we're actually promoting revolutions. I noticed even the other day, Pope Francis, when he was at the Feast of the Epiphany, talked about the wise men, the kings, magi. He said the magi, how did they keep going? Because he said they looked up, they had a dream. They didn't look at the ground and spend all their time working on the problems. They looked up and followed the dream. And he said the same is true for us. We need to have horizons. Remember what it says in the Bible, that people without a vision perish. We need vision. We need to promote vision. Another point I want to emphasise here is, in our youth ministry, I think it's very important that we recognise that we are called to build ecclesial communities and connect with others. We don't go to God on our own. That's a classic of Christianity. We don't go to God on our own. We need each other. But we need each other to form a little experience of church. This is important. Church is not just the structure, the walls, the building. Church is a living reality where between 2 or more, 3, 4, 5, 10 people, Jesus is present. As I said, Pope John Paul II encouraged an awful lot of ecclesial communities, movements, groups. Interestingly, an Anglican writer just recently has brought out a book, Michael Moyna, just recently brought out a book, and it's Church in Life is what it's called, a big book, Church in Life. But his whole thesis is, we need today to really promote ecclesial communities. And what he means by that is, it's not enough for people anymore just simply to go to Mass on Sunday and then the rest of the week separate. He said we need church, which are ecclesial communities, which are communities in the university, communities in the shop, communities in the workplace, community in the office. In other words, where people are living, where they're having their life, 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people are meeting to become an ecclesial community. And it seems to me that also for our youth ministry, this is a major topic. Young people should be able to experience the ecclesial community among those who are youth ministers, and they should in turn become people who form ecclesial communities wherever they are. And then linked to that, connecting all over the place. That's why I say we're joining the dots between us all. We need to connect all these ecclesial communities. So in that way, I would say we need to keep Jesus among us. This is important. He is the youth minister. Ultimately, we are youth ministers, but the ultimate youth minister is Jesus among us. And just what the Second Vatican Council was saying, we're not talking about presenting a museum about Jesus to people. We're talking about presenting Jesus. Jesus is present because he promised, where 2 or more are gathered in my name. In other words, in himself. How are we gathered around himself? In his word, the gospel put into practice. In the neighbour with one another, in community. In the Eucharistic sacraments that form us. Keeping Jesus among us because he is the minister. He is the one who guides his ministry. 3 more points and I'm finished. This one, however, I want to say is important. What I call youth ministry is a ministry that generates life in a maternal or paternal way. What I mean by that is, youth ministry isn't a job, or it isn't fabricating something. It isn't simply a structure that manages to provide a program. If we really are involved in youth ministry, we're involved in the kind of ministry that St. Paul, for instance, talks about when he's in prison and he writes to Philemon. And he says to Philemon, I entrust to you Onesimus, whom I begot, I gave birth to, while in prison, in chains. In other words, youth ministry is generated, not made. And where is it generated? And we have to say it is generated, of course, in our encounter with Jesus in suffering. We can't deny that has to be a major part of our youth ministry. And it's our major part of youth ministry at a few levels. 1, youth ministry isn't always successful. Jesus wasn't always successful. On the cross he wasn't successful. We have to recognise there are moments in our youth ministry where we will be disappointed, we will be discouraged. They're the moments we really have to live with Jesus at the cross, Jesus crucified, even we to the point of saying, why? We have those moments, why bother? But they're the moments, if we live them with Jesus, that we are generating life. We're giving birth to life. Secondly, Jesus on the cross is a style of life. What was Jesus doing on the cross? He was going out to humanity to save it. In other words, Jesus, looking at Jesus on the cross, is a springboard to go out. And that's why Pope Francis says, the church is not an NGO. And if it's just an NGO, it's nothing. The church journeys to the degree it journeys along the way of the cross. In the cross, in Jesus, in the one who cries, my God, why have you forsaken me? We have a key to going outside ourselves. But thirdly, it reminds us, looking at the cross, Jesus died, the scripture tells us, outside the walls of the city. He died outside Jerusalem. Which does that mean? Jerusalem was the place that symbolically was the place where God could be found, within the walls, the covenant people. Jesus dies outside it. Jesus therefore tells us he has already reached every young person that we meet. He's already reached every situation, every relationship that we feel is outside God. He's there, he's working, he's already there. So by looking to Jesus crucified at the cross, we also discover a consolation for ourselves that the place of youth ministry is never outside him. It's also always accompanied by him. Always accompanied by him. And what does Jesus do on the cross? He gives out the Spirit. He gives up the Spirit. So there's always the Spirit at work. That's why I want to emphasize this. Youth ministry is a ministry which generates life, gives birth to life, linked to Jesus on the cross. Obviously, we need to be all the time exercising creative fidelity. We come from a 2,000-year history of the church with huge amounts of insight, huge mystics, saints, lives, examples, stories, huge amount, which we can't forget. As Pope Francis says, we need to be both creative and faithful. There's no point in having a spirituality that's off the clouds. There's no point either of having simply an approach that just says, well, look, this is the way they do it, you know, in the world in general, of patterns, we adapt ourselves to that. Neither extreme is right. We must be faithful to our tradition, but we must be creative. We must be creative and faithful. And finally, let's not let ourselves be robbed of hope. It's a point, as I said, Pope Francis mentions very, very often, that the devil is the one that wants to come along and sow discouragement in us. We won't succeed, there's too many problems now. Youth ministry is too difficult. Look at the problems in Ireland. But we need to always be attentive to the voice that that's not of God. We have to be the people who are of God's part. God is doing something new. It's starting again in Ireland with a new way towards youth and youth ministry. We're on that part, and we encourage each other. And that's why we have an ecclesial community, in this case a Redemptorist ecclesial community of youth ministries. We encourage one another, and in that way we go forward, not robbed of hope, as the Pope puts it. When we were out last year in confirmation, I often talked about that phrase, don't let yourselves be robbed of hope. And I was amazed how many people came up to me afterwards and said, really, that phrase helped me. So many people today find themselves discouraged. So, to conclude, a quote from Pope Francis, which I leave you with. He said this at the World Youth Day, I think it was Krakow, but it could be in Rio, I'm not too sure, I haven't written it down here. At times in our lives, we aim lower than higher. At those times, it's good to realise that God remains faithful, even obstinate in his love for us. The fact is, he loves us even more than we love ourselves. He believes in us more than we believe in ourselves. He is always cheering us on. He is our biggest fan. He's there for us, waiting with patience and hope, even when we turn in on ourselves and brood over our troubles and past injuries. But such brooding is unworthy of our spiritual stature. It's kind of a virus, infecting and blocking everything. It closes doors and prevents us from getting up and starting over. God, on the other hand, is hopelessly hopeful. He believes that we can always get up, and he hates to see us glum and gloomy. It's sad to see young people who are glum, because we are always his beloved sons and daughters. Let's be mindful of this at the dawn of every new day. It will do us good to pray every morning, Lord, I thank you for loving me. I'm sure that you love me. Help me to be in love with my own life, not with my faults that need to be corrected, but with life itself, which is a great gift, for it is a time to love and to be loved.